Okay, it looks like we still have a few people dialing in, but we will go ahead and kick it off. We want to be very respectful of your time with this hour-long webinar about the American Rescue Plan Act funds, which we will refer to as ARPA throughout the remainder of the next hour. We are excited to revisit this. You might recall early on with the ARPA funding, Retail Strategies was very involved in educating communities and localities across the country about what ARPA is and how you can really invest those funds. And it's a good time to come back and revisit that. We know a lot more today than we did a few years ago when this was initially launched. And this webinar is being recorded. You will receive a recording of it afterwards. And if you would like to have this deck, you can. Please feel free to submit questions throughout the webinar, and we will reserve some time at the end to address all of your questions. I know a few of you pre-submitted questions, which we appreciate, and we will do our best to address those during this time, but also have some confidence in that we have an entire team of people here at Retail Strategies that are more than happy to follow up with you individually after this webinar and look at a customized approach for you and your community. So let's go ahead and kick it off. And what are we going to be covering today? Excuse me. So I'm Lacey Beasley. I'm the president of Retail Strategies, have about 20 years of experience in community development. I'm on the board of trustees with ICSC and work closely with National League of Cities on a course called Retail as a Catalyst for Economic Development. At Retail Strategies, we have a depth of experience of listening to the communities on what their community needs are, and then really developing solutions around those community needs. And that's how we came across Jen Gregory. Jen Gregory has about 14 years of experience with downtown revitalization and has been very active in political advocacy and government services. And she's really our in-house guru on everything public policy. And if you haven't had the pleasure of hearing Jen on one of her webinars in the past, then I certainly encourage you to go to our website and click on webinars under resources. And there's a depth of information in there and how we can really help you as communities tap into state or federal funding to help you achieve your goals. And Jen is really the pro on all the policy. She's worked directly as a practitioner in a downtown and with Main Street in a Mississippi city. She won top 50 under 40 from the Mississippi Business Journal, and has worked with over 200 communities on downtown revitalization. So a true pro in this industry, and it's my pleasure for the two of us to be able to cover our topics today. So Jen, I'll go ahead and kick it over to you to tell us what our audience can expect to receive over the next hour.
Okay, thanks, Lacey, and thank you all so much for joining us this morning. So for the balance of our hour together, we're going to try to cram in really as much as we can, but we want to first give you a little bit of a recap on the American Rescue Plan Act and all of the different iterations and updates that have taken place over the last, several years. And most importantly, where we are today and what specific actions have to be taken over the next almost 5 months in order to ensure that cities can retain those funds, can use them as an investment, and do not have to return them. So we're going to go into depth on that, put you at ease for what you need to do. And then really the fun part is that we're going to share with you what other communities just like yours have done with their funds and how they have invested them in their community to create a return on this unprecedented funding that all cities in America have received. And then, like Lacey mentioned, we're going to take your questions, answer those pre-submitted, but also take them live. So be sure to enter your questions into the Q&A portal or in the chat box, and we'll do our best to get through those either in the midst of this webinar or at the end when we take your questions.
Well, first, let's start with the poll. Has your locality allocated all of your ARPA funds? So we're going to go ahead and launch this poll right now. Please take a minute to complete your answer. Very simple, yes, no, or I'm not sure. And that's okay if you are not sure. This allocation went directly from Treasury to the city managers. And we visited with a lot of community leaders that weren't quite sure what their locality's allocation was or how those were spent. So that's okay if you don't know. If you do know, if you've spent those funds, then we would love to hear from you in the chat box what you spent your funds on. And if you have not spent them, hopefully we'll be able to share some examples of what other communities have spent their funds on and how you might be able to allocate those by the end of the year. So I'm going to go ahead. It looks like everybody has had a chance to complete that poll. So I will end the poll now and share the results. You can see here where we have about, yes, it's 19% where you have allocated all your funds. 53% of you have not allocated your funds, and 28% are not quite sure yet. If you're not sure, then certainly ask your city manager or your mayor what the plans are. But hopefully we can help you navigate that again, either through an individual phone call after this webinar or an email or anything that we can do to help. So I'm going to stop sharing the poll now, and thank you for this feedback. So about half of you have not fully allocated your funds yet. So Jen, why don't you tell us a little bit about the history? I think it's so important because this can be lost over time. And especially as professionals, we see with localities are often changing jobs. There's been a great deal of disruption post-pandemic. And so a lot of people might be new to this. So walking us through the history from the time that the American Rescue Plan Act was passed until today.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you can see, a lot has happened with just this one bill. But I want to stress the unprecedented nature of this bill first and foremost. And I think we'll mention that throughout this webinar. It has never happened ever in American history that every single city, county, town, village, and incorporated locality and tribe within the United States received a direct allocation of funding from the United States government without having to ask for it. Completely unprecedented, and certainly something that we don't look to see happen again in the near future. So when cities received these funds, first of all, they were a little bit surprised. But the most, I think, important thing was that they had so many questions. How can I use these funds? I don't want to have to give them back. I don't want to get in trouble. And so after that bill was passed in March of 2021, shortly after, in short, for government standards, the Treasury published the interim final rule, which came out in May of 2021, which described the ways in which these funds can be used. However, there were still a lot of questions. That rule was interim for a specific purpose. Treasury took a period of time, you can see months, many months, to take questions, to get feedback from city leaders, to really understand where the gaps were in the legislation and what questions were still unanswered. We're going to go through those eligible uses here in just a moment. But those came out in May of 2021. So fast forward 7 months or so to January of 2022, and the final rule was released by Treasury. And this gave a lot more clarity, and it also gave a lot more freedom to communities that received less than $10 million in funding. And we're going to go through that here in just a moment. But want to kind of put a pin in that point that in January 2022, that final rule really expanded a lot of eligibility for smaller communities. Then last year, August of 23, a more sort of unknown and less covered update came out called the ARPA Flex update. And what this did was it gave a little bit more allowability for using the funds on very specific things. But more importantly, it gave clarity to what has to be done to really wrap up this program. And that's what you see in green. And the most important thing that we want to iterate today, and that is that by the end of this year, these funds must be obligated. We're going to talk about what that means precisely. But that is the most important date for you to remember. At the end of this year, funds have to be obligated. And then at the end of 2026, the funds have to be expended. So again, we'll go into a little bit more detail on that. But let's first look at the eligible uses that came out as part of the interim final rule. And this is really dictating how government prefers for these funds to be spent. Now, keep in mind, if you received less than $10 million, this can apply to you, but there's a lot better path for you that we're going to cover on the next couple of slides. But just to be fully encompassing of this bill, the interim final rule said that these funds can be used in 4 ways. First, to make necessary investments in water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure. Many of you have spent your funds, at least in part, on infrastructure. The second provision is for government services, so anything that your government would normally do to the extent of the reduction in lost revenue due to COVID-19. The third way is to provide premium pay to eligible workers that performed that essential work during the throes of the pandemic. And then finally, to respond to the public health emergency with respect to COVID-19. So this is what came out originally. These eligible uses still apply. However, the great news and what we really want to focus on today is that if you received less than $10 million, which most of you probably did, the final rule provided your locality to use these funds in broad ways with minimal restrictions and no requirement for justification of lost revenue during the pandemic. A lot of your communities, rural communities, didn't lose money during the pandemic. And so this became a difficult thing. How can we spend these funds? So want to really make note of this, that if you received less than $10 million, you can spend those funds in any way that classifies as general governmental services. What is general governmental services? As you can see in green, it is any service traditionally provided by a local government. So think about over the life of your city, what are things that you spend money on? Those things, those programs, those projects, those products can be covered by ARPA funds. So this is the most flexible use. There are very little requirements for reporting and compliance. Simply, you just have to tell Treasury what you did with the funds. No formulas, no ratios. So if you spent less than $10 million, this needs to be, or if you received less than $10 million, this certainly needs to be your focus. And again, we can really help you with specific questions that you have. There are very few restrictions. Essentially, these funds were meant to stimulate economies. They were not meant to cushion your budget. So cities cannot use these funds for a rainy day fund. You can't just put them aside for the future, and you can't use them to pay off debt, essentially. So with the exception of those 2 things, these funds can be used in broad ways. But even though that is true, industry experts have really given us some advice, and we want to hear from that. So Lacey, tell us about what some of your colleagues in industry have advised us and our cities on how to spend these funds.
Well, absolutely. As you mentioned, this is unprecedented times in that the direct allocation of cash went to the localities. It was not funneled through the states. And Clarence Anthony, the president of National League of Cities, was a huge part of the advocacy for this. And what he has shared is that he really wants communities to get creative on investing these funds and showing a positive ROI. Come back with the results of how you spent those funds and how that is moving your community forward. And this is new money that is available to you. It starts as a stimulus to get you through a difficult economic time, but it's not tapping into your regular budget and tax base. So how can you really use that to move your community forward? And Clarence and National League of Cities said, invest it that way, feed us back with that information so we can be an advocate in the future to have that direct allocation of cash directly to localities, and on future projects. And so this is really a great test of how communities are spending their money, investing them, how they're tracking those results. And it might be something that happens again in the future. What we heard from Main Street America is they really want to see people utilize these funds for downtown revitalization. They're critically important for them. And we know that downtown is the heart and the soul and the character of our communities. And this is a great opportunity to invest those funds this way. We heard from Toby Ridner, the president of Council of Development Finance Agencies, that said there are 19,000 localities that received these funds. And initially, when it was released, there was a lot of hesitation or fear about how to spend the funds. And he said, go out, spend the money, invest it, plan to be audited, which is fine, but don't have that analysis paralysis and freeze the cash, because if you do not follow those guidelines, then you just give it back to Treasury. And you have the option of either investing those locally or giving them back to Treasury. So the better option is certainly investing them. And that's what we found from a lot of localities that we have worked with that we're going to be able to share with you today. So let's talk about that. Knowing that there is that tight deadline that Jen talked about of the allocation of really how you are going to spend that money. The deadline is December 31st of 2024. So we're only about 6 months out from the communities either having to give that money back to Treasury or really defining what their plan is. What's important to know is it's not just about defining what your plan is, it's about having actual contracts in place. You need to have subcontracts and contracts and really know that there's a payment requirement. Now, that payment doesn't have to be made until December 31st of 2026. And so this is the new flex ruling that came out recently. So knowing that you might only have 6 months left to contract those funds, it's really important that you find a project that you can invest in and contract within that time period. And then a lot of times when you look at your local procurement laws, those might take a couple of months. A lot of communities use these funds. And again, I encourage you to plug it in the chat how you have allocated those funds. But a lot used them in different ways, whether that was buying a new fire truck, focusing on the sewer projects, water projects, broadband. There was a great deal of the $350 billion that was allocated to the localities. These were substantial needs that the communities had on their infrastructure. In the beginning of this, then we encourage communities to carve out about 10% of that allocation for anything that involves putting money back into the community and community development so you can help build capacity that way for your economic vitality. And that's what the spirit of the bill was about. That's what Clarence Anthony pushed for. That's what Toby Ridner pushed for. And a lot of the leaders that we saw, even with the Brookings Institute, really came out with a strong advocate about that investment. So whatever you contract by the end of this year, you have to make the payments by December 31st of 2026. So that timeline is quite short. There were some communities that may have had a great plan to spend these funds on building a new road or a water treatment plant. And maybe that project cost more than what the ARPA allocation was to your locality. So it was issuing a bond, finding ways you could supplement that, build those ARPA funds into that capital stack for the improvement. But across the country, what we've seen is tremendous challenges in construction costs and vendors who are available to perform these services. If 19,000 localities all wanted a new water sewer treatment plant, then there weren't enough vendors to fill that need. So you may have initially come up with a plan that how you wanted to spend your ARPA dollars, but that may have fallen through. So what we have are some solutions of how you can allocate a contract or sign a contract to allocate those funds by the end of this year that would be expended by December 31st of 2026. That is an investment back in the community. You can see we're about 30% of these funds have not been allocated or assigned yet. And this is by the Brookings Institute. This was updated this month. It is a real number, a new number. And you can do the research to go in and take a deeper dive on that. But what we're focused on today is about 8% of the allocation was used in economic development. So of that 70% that was used. Then 7% of that was in economic development. Of the economic development allocation of about 4.5 billion, then 2.3 billion was spent on small business support and downtown revitalization. And again, this is a great way that you can track the progress that you made of investing those funds and share them back with the Treasury. There are more than a dozen communities who used retail strategies as their service to help them invest their funds. So there's a variety of different ways that we work with communities. We were established back in 2011. And we have an extensive background in community development, as I've mentioned today. What we do is listen to communities, and we really primarily work with rural communities. We've worked with some non-rural communities, but the majority of the partnerships that we have are in localities with population of less than 100,000. So if that fits you, we're here to listen and to help and apply our resources. We have about 70 team members who really specialize in different service lines and ways that we partner with municipalities. So let's look at a handful of those solutions. Let's first start with a downtown revitalization, which we've talked about a lot today. And we're going to give you what that program is and some examples of our success in communities that use their ARPA funds to hire retail strategies for downtown revitalization, and then how that had a positive improvement on their downtown that will pay them back for years to come. So downtown revitalization is one solution that we have that Jen Gregory, president of Downtown Strategies, who's on the call with us today, runs that entire team. We also have small business support. So during the pandemic, we saw a high concern for the existing businesses that exist. So imagine your entrepreneurs that really make your town unique. And it's not like a national chain that you can find anywhere in America and walk in and have the exact same experience. It's your local coffee shop, your local clothing boutique. These small businesses really needed a lot of help during the pandemic, but through that, we've discovered some additional ways that we can continue to support the operations side of small businesses. So another great way to invest these funds. And then finally, national retail recruitment. And national retail recruitment is an entirely separate team as a part of retail strategies, because there are incredible differences between downtown revitalization, small business support, and national retail recruitment. And for each of those solutions that we partner with communities, we have a team of experts that work with that. So we're going to break those down in more detail for you. What we found from communities is they want these things. They want places to shop, places to eat. They want the character, the placemaking, the economic vitality that they feel through all things retail. But the challenges come into play with having the time allocation, the expertise, or really the tools that are necessary to implement on these practices. You understand that anything with downtown revitalization, small business support, or a national retail recruitment is helping build capacity for your community. It's the human infrastructure that you are putting your efforts into and your partnership into. And so you know that putting money into that helps build the sales tax base. It creates jobs, and ultimately it enhances the quality of life, which is what the communities with a passion and a heart for giving back to the citizens of that community want to do, is give back to that quality of life. So one of the first ones I've hit on heavily is small business support. So Jen, this is really an exciting way that we have been able to work with small businesses. Tell us more about this program.
Yeah, absolutely, Lacey. You did a great job of mentioning the real struggles that locally owned businesses faced as soon as the pandemic really happened. But what we've learned is that after the pandemic, consumer behavior has changed a lot, and those changes haven't reverted back to pre-pandemic, habits and behaviors. Things like shopping online, things like wanting to purchase an item online and pick it up in the store. That convenience expectation is something that we can probably all relate with. And so with our small business support program, in addition to understanding those changing consumer behaviors, we also were talking to city leaders throughout the pandemic and after. and also followed some of the research, some of the Brookings Institute research that you've mentioned today, Lacey, but also Main Street America did a survey of thousands of businesses in 2020, and we found that over 60% of them had no online presence. And this doesn't mean a Facebook page, but this means the real opportunity to have an e-commerce platform. It's essential these days that our local businesses not only have their brick and mortar that really is the gathering place downtown or in commercial corridors, but they must have an online presence as well to meet these changing consumer needs. And so we have built a really exciting technical assistance and training program where cities can invest in their small businesses so that all of the locally owned mom and pop businesses can have access to this really cutting edge training where they can access these tools, these resources, these videos, downloadable worksheets and such on demand. You know, we know that entrepreneurs are really busy. They're working in their stores. Oftentimes they don't get to work on their stores until 10:30 at night or midnight or in the morning. So you can see a brief snapshot of this program that we have built to deliver to small businesses. We are fortunate that we are currently, as of today, serving about 750 small businesses through this program. And we look forward to the opportunity to serving even more. The way that we deliver this training, I mentioned it's virtual, it's on demand, almost like a Netflix, if you will, of small business trainings. It covers 5 different learning paths. So the type of training that we're offering, first, omni-channel retail really focuses on that bricks and clicks approach that I mentioned. If that's something you can relate to your businesses really needing to develop their online presence, then I think this is something that you'd like to hear more about. Restaurant resiliency. We know that local restaurants have really been hit hard, not only by COVID, but by this economy. It's very expensive to operate a business. So we have a team of professionals that deliver restaurant training, business modernization. How many of you have heard of AI? It's a buzzword. We hear it everywhere. We're talking about it all the time. But AI has really produced some amazing tools for small businesses to help modernize their operations, to help automate their daily operations. So we focus on that. The holidays obviously are a pivotal point for locally owned businesses. So we're able to provide toolkits and templates and strategies for making the most of that season. And then finally, we're able to offer training directly to landlords, to property owners, so that we can develop that small business ecosystem in your community and really break down those barriers that entrepreneurs tend to see. And finally, I want to mention, how has this program worked and how has it helped other communities? We've been fortunate enough to offer this program in multiple states from coast to coast. Youngstown, Ohio is one of those communities that's a bit larger than our typical community. Like Lacey mentioned, we're generally in rural communities, but we were so pleased to partner with Youngstown, Ohio to provide training specifically to some of their minority-owned businesses in their market. We saw some amazing results that really fueled our team to continue developing this program. And we'd love to share more with you about that. But the great component of this is that we are able to really deliver it in a way that your businesses can digest it on their own time, which we have found to be essential for supporting entrepreneurs. Next, we want to talk a little bit about our downtown revitalization program. And this is something, like Lacey mentioned, that is a little bit different from national retail recruitment. So we want to be sure and continue to separate those two. We are big believers that communities need to focus on both. They need national retail brands that their consumers know and are familiar with so that they can get those everyday goods and essentials, and to drive sales tax revenue in their community. But we know that what really exudes the heart and soul and character of a community is their downtown. That's the gathering place. That's where you come together to meet your neighbor, to go to the farmer's market. And so those two are essentially important. At Downtown Strategies, we have had the great honor of working with about 200 communities in 25 states, again, from coast to coast. We are the only firm that offers downtown action plans with implementation support. How many of you have received a strategic plan or a master plan and it's sitting on a bookshelf or it's sitting on a drive in your computer? I'm a former practitioner, and my team is just that. We have been Main Street directors, we've been economic developers, and we know that those plans often sit on shelves. So we designed our offering to really support communities by first creating short-term action plans that will help them make changes and improvements as soon as tomorrow. Then we lock arms with our communities for 2 to 3 years and help implement those plans so that your community sees immediate results. You see that the focus areas for our downtown planning and implementation really crosses the gamut of things that I think are priorities for city leaders. Policy is things like incentives. How can we incentivize that property owner to improve their building? I think we can probably all relate to properties that we really want to see activated in our downtowns, but how do we get it done? So we can provide some custom recommendations for policies and incentives that can do just that. Design, what does your downtown look like? How can we improve, add color and vitality with low investment in the short term? Again, not super visionary long-term approaches here. Tourism and promotion, of course, key focus. How do we get outside dollars into our community? And then economic vitality, looking at those potential catalyst projects in your community, really understanding the assets and helping you use those as fuel for the economics of your downtown. Just briefly, you can see a couple snapshots of some of the plans that we've created for our communities, but really important that we hit on that we're looking at, bite-sized strategies. It's kind of a term that we use. A lot of you don't have a downtown staff. A lot of you don't have a ton of members on your team that can do big, involved programs and projects. So we are identifying what you should be doing over the next 5 years, not everything that you could possibly do, and really focusing on practical, small-scale strategies rather than big dreams and visions. After we deliver that action plan to your community, that's when the fun begins. We lock arms with you and help you implement those strategies to see immediate action. We want to highlight a community. Portales, New Mexico, used their ARPA funds to invest in their community, to invest in their downtown. This is a great college town, and we were able to deliver that plan and see immediate success through our implementation program. There were a couple of vacancies that we were able to help them filter down to which they should focus on first. And in 90 days, we saw 2 of the 4 vacant properties backfilled with a new use, really breathing new life into that community. We provided some marketing materials for them to recruit new businesses, and we helped them implement a town and gown kind of college-focused event that really brought together their community and these different cohorts of users in the community. We assisted them with wayfinding signage concepts and a public art project. So a lot of fun, a lot of success in that community. And the fun thing is that every single community that we work with is different. Those strategies are different. The implementation approach is different because no 2 downtowns are alike. And that's really the fun of it. So you've heard about 2 of our 3 offerings. And now I want to turn it back over to Lacey to talk about our 3rd and to really wrap us up. And then we look forward to your questions. Lacey?
Yes, thank you, Jen, so much. And please plug in your questions in either the chat or the Q&A as we're going through this. And we certainly want to address those. One of the questions I'm going to go ahead and address now, just for clarification, and the question is about the small business support. Is that offered through retail strategies? Small business support, downtown strategies, and national retail recruitment are all services that Retail Strategies offers to communities. So the way that it works with small business support is you as the locality, the city or the county, would contract with Retail Strategies, and all your businesses in your community could enroll in this program. So it's an online learned management software where each business will get their own username, their own login. They can go through the training on demand. Jen hit on this, and I'm just going to emphasize it again because we found with small business owners, it's really meeting them where they're at. They are working in their business during the day. They're with their family in the evenings, and they're working on their business at 10 p.m. on a Tuesday or 2 p.m. on a Sunday afternoon. So the training is available to those small business owners 24/7, anytime that they want. And what would happen is you would contract with Retail Strategies, and then you would share with all the businesses in your community that this is available to them, and then they all enroll and they have full access to the 40 mini courses throughout the course of an entire year. So it's an awesome program that's contracted that way. And then the downtown, just to summarize and highlight what Jen just said, also a great program. She talked about Towns and Gowns, that we have a lot of communities we've worked with that are the size of Portales that have higher education. We really specialize in that. But what we found that is so encouraging is that if there's a volunteer committee that wants to be involved with downtown change, then how can we be involved with supplying the confidence to move forward? It's incremental monthly changes that are within your control to help make change, to ultimately see those long-term changes. So a 5-year plan, very bite-sized, very how-to, and something that we can work with even your volunteer board to help implement. And that makes us very different from any other company that's out there. This isn't offered by an architect or an engineer. It's offered by a practitioner who did it herself for 10 years, and Jen Gregory and her team. So I think that's important to emphasize. Jen, anything else to recap on that before we shift over to national retail recruitment?
No, I think that's great. And the last thing I'll mention is that as we go through these services, you can think about what might be a fit for your community. And like Portales, a lot of the communities that have worked with us have chosen more than one. They have multiple priorities. So there's definitely an opportunity to kind of pick and choose multiple ways that you have needs in your community, and that we've highlighted solutions that we can support you. So Lacey?
Great point. Yes, some communities use their ARPA funds for all 3 of these services. Some used them for one or the other. So please keep that in mind. They stack very well, or you can just customize for one or all of them. So let's talk about national retail recruitment. Retail Strategies has worked with about 450 communities since 2011, specific to national retail recruitment. You can see some of the brands over to the left. And let me explain just why these are different, why we have different teams, and why we think holistically it's so important to focus on all of them. Those brands that you see, this is just a sampling of logos of the types of brands we've worked with, but a lot of them that are publicly traded will announce on Wall Street every single year, we're going to do 30 new stores in the country this year. We're going to do 1,000 new stores in the country this year. And that is a very standard prototype that can be duplicated across the entire country. And that is something that we have learned best practices in. And Retail Strategies developed out of a full-service commercial real estate firm called Retail Specialist. Retail Specialist for the last 20 years has been doing site selection for major retail brands such as Target, BJ's Wholesale, and also working with property owners. We work with several Publix anchored shopping centers on property management and leasing, and then also with a vast amount of experience in ground up development. So that's Retail Specialist. And Retail Strategies works directly with the municipalities. So really, if you think about those two, it's one company with 2 really strong brands, and they both feed each other in information sharing and knowledge. And the only thing that changes is our client the municipality, the retailer, or the property owner? So our process is threefold process, where we go into discovery initially when we're engaged with the community, and then we connect. So we want to understand your local unique features of your real estate, and then advance, which is how do you implement the plan that is put together through our national retail recruitment platform. So, really, this serves as an extension of your team. You can see a quote here from Carolyn Gibson, who's been a long and loyal partner of Retail Strategies. And she truly looks at us as a teammate of her staff that's just an outsourced teammate that's a part of it. But it's all about economic development, community development, and how we can use our expertise to help you in that plan. So, what we do is we go into a community, we run all the data and analysis. Then we come and do a boots on the ground assessment. We look at all the properties that are on market or off market. We catalog those in our system. Then we look at retailers and restaurants that are either regional or national brands that are not in your community that should be. And then essentially play matchmaker between the property owners and the brands that we believe are viable prospects for you. So again, this is where it's a bit different from small business support or downtown. Those are very, very unique. And a lot of small business owners will open one business in their lifetime, where the national brands will open thousands across the country. So it's a bit of a different approach, but it's really what can you control? On this side, we really focus on the real estate as a means of recruitment. And on the small business support, we really focus on the operations. So I encourage you to mentally think about the difference of the real estate side of retail recruitment and retention versus the operation side of retail recruitment and retention, and think about where you as a locality can have an influence. So here's a community, Snyder, Texas, similar type population to Portales, just shy of 12,000. And, Snyder is just outside of Lubbock and the Texas Panhandle. And they said, we really want all. We want small business support, downtown revitalization, and national retail recruitment. And through that process, we were able to recruit a Wendy's and an HTO. So if you're not familiar with these brands, they're great brands. And a lot of the growth we're seeing right now is in restaurant and in single tenant build-to-suit development. What I want to encourage you to think about is the economic impact of these national brands. So each one of them, most fast food restaurants are going to generate anywhere from $1 million to $2 million each year for each unit. Now, the exception to that is Chick-fil-A, who's doing north of $9 million per store. So that's very much going to vary. McDonald's might do $3 million per store. So when you think of national retail recruitment and you immediately think of Costco, Target, Trader Joe's, you can come back and look at a very positive economic impact, even from a handful of new fast food restaurants or beverage concepts. So you can see from these two brands, there's an annual sales tax return back to Snyder of over $50,000 a year, and it created about 48 new jobs. So when you think about the ARPA funds that they have invested in this program, this is brand new revenue that will pay them for the next 30 years. So the difference of spending the funds on a fire truck, for instance, that's great. Glad you spent it on that. That was a need. It's critically important to the safety of your community. But if you take a small allocation of this and then also invest it in something that will pay you back far beyond December 31st of 2026, that's where you can really make some change in your community long term. And that's what Portales did. So you can see where $2.56 million is generated between Wendy's and HTO in this town of 11,000 in the Texas Panhandle. We have several success stories of our 800 communities that we've worked with across the country, but wanted to share with you a few of them that were specific to the federal funding. So we're going to go ahead and launch a poll now and see if you would like to learn more about how you can have a customized approach to investing in your ARPA dollars. As we saw earlier, and I'm going to get to the right poll. Here we go. Thank you for your patience there. Just launch the poll, either yes or no thanks. But go ahead and plug that in and put, again, in the chat any questions you might have or in the Q&A. put your questions in there. And again, we would be more than happy to have any of our team members call you, hear what your desires are, your needs are, how you can develop a plan that is contracted before December 31st of 2024 and spent before December 31st of 2026. And we will provide to you with all of our services the return on investment so that you can then report that back to Treasury in your allocation of funding. So we do see that several of you have said, yes, please, I want to learn more about this. And we appreciate that. And we're certainly here to help. We have several community resources that are available to you through our website. So please go to retailstrategies.com resources to find those. You can also scan this QR code to get a walkability assessment that's a score for your downtown or a free retail leakage report. You can have all of those things with our team. So we're just here to help. Whether we're a contracted partner or not, what we believe is rising tides float all boats. And the more the communities know about the resources that are available to them or best practices or principles that come with retail recruitment, retail retention, and downtown revitalization, the more we can all help each other. It's such an honor and privilege to work with so many communities across the country in this service. And we are not only the largest firm who offers this service, we're really one of the only ones in the country that is doing community development the way that we do. So we would love to partner with you and talk more about that. So let's look at some of our Q&A that is going to be available. And then I'm going to pull up that QR code so you can have some time to scan that and go ahead and fill out the information so that you will receive a call from one of our team members after this is over. Jen, a couple of the questions that we have submitted is how small is too small? My town only has 500 people in the incorporated area, but 1,200 in the zip code. Nothing much left in downtown. What do you think there?
Wow. I feel like this question was specifically designed for me because I have a great answer. We have a case study of a wonderful community that we've had the pleasure of working with. It's Inez, Kentucky. And I'm not seeing the question, so I don't know if these are my friends from Inez that are throwing me the softball. I don't think so. But we've had the pleasure of working with Inez, Kentucky, community in Eastern Kentucky, population of around 500 people. Very, very similar. And I happen to also live in a really rural part of Mississippi as well. And so I'm very familiar with working with rural communities. And what I'll tell you is that the implementation component is what really shines and serves communities with small populations. So in Inez, our team traveled to the community. We met with some stakeholders, small group, because small community. We looked at what was left in the downtown and we put together some strategies that didn't include waiting on a developer, that didn't include waiting on somebody with a ton of money, but it focused on what can the community do tomorrow to get people to come downtown. And that's really our belief, is that we think that retail and businesses and restaurants follow the people. And so when we're working with a small community, we want to first help them create vitality with people. So what does that look like? Maybe it's a monthly event, even if there are no businesses downtown, where there's some music, maybe some local music, a guy playing a guitar. There's some local vendors, people with home-based businesses that are selling their baked goods. And we're manufacturing a reason for them to come together, for this specific purpose. Then we want to think about, it is hard to get new businesses into vacant buildings in the short term. So what can we do visibly to really show the community that something's happening downtown? So whether that's painting crosswalks, whether that's a new mural. In Inez, it was a banner that announced to people that they had arrived in downtown, that there was a new day coming, and it started to shift the perception. we saw immediate success in Inez. Now we're ready to continue implementing strategies from the strategic action plan. And we have a local community team that we were really leaning on and supporting. We now have a new team that says, wait, they're doing that. We want to do it too. So all that to say, sometimes it's even easier in smaller communities to really get in there and start moving that needle. So no community is too small. And I think what you want to avoid, though, is a plan with no implementation support, because really building local capacity is critical. So I'd love to talk with you more about it, but we definitely have some great examples of successes in small communities.
Mm-hmm. And leaning in on that even further, the next question is about how small can a community be to have some success in national retail recruitment? And I'm glad that question was asked, because one of our partnerships that we didn't even cover today was Okanagan County, Washington. And they used ARPA funds to come in and support 17 different communities in the county through a program called Retail Academy. And some of the participants of the communities in that program had population even at 1,200. And so for every community, you have the option from a national retail perspective of either a gas station, a Subway, or a dollar store. There are still retailers that want to open, and even communities with population as low as 1,000 people. And what we really focus on is really building your customized retail trade area that goes beyond your municipal boundaries. So Retail Academy is a program where we supply to the locality all the research analysis with your customized retail trade area, the top 3 to 5 properties that we believe are viable for retail development, and then a prospect list of about 10 brands that we think are a good fit. And then we train you on how you can implement that plan. A lot of what we do with the national retail recruitment that I talked about earlier is full service, where Retail Strategies develops the plan and implements the plan on behalf of the locality. Retail Academy implements the plan and trains the locality on how they can implement their own retail recruitment. And that is really a good fit for communities with population of less than 7,500. So we can certainly work with you on that. There's another question here, and I'll let you answer it, Jen. Do you work with communities outside of using ARPA funds?
Absolutely. We've worked with about, a little more than a dozen communities using their ARPA funds. Certainly, it is an allowable use, but for communities that don't have ARPA funds, that have already spent them, that is certainly the majority of our client base. We've worked with, in combining all of our different services, about 800 communities, and probably, under 20 of those communities use their ARPA funds with us. So certainly we work with communities every single day out of their general operating budgets. Also, other partners in the community, economic development agencies, economic development districts, even chambers of commerce have been partners and clients of ours. So our mission really is to serve communities through community development initiatives. And that can be via a city, a county, an economic development district, a chamber, really any combination. So certainly do work with communities beyond ARPA funds, and would love to talk to you guys about that.
Absolutely. And there's a couple questions actually about the small business support. So highlighting again kind of the mental differences between the three ways. So the national retail recruitment is one. So think about your major highway where the highest traffic count is in town. Downtown strategies, think about taking an asset-based approach to getting your real estate and your street and your placemaking ready to attract the entrepreneurs, right? So using those 4 elements that Jen talked about policy, design, economic vitality, and really getting the downtown ready through the actual physical attributes of the downtown. That's downtown strategies. And then think about small business support being for existing businesses who already are already operating or thinking about starting an opening business. And then that's the operation side of their business. So 3 different things that pair really well together. So one of the questions is, if we already have some downtown initiatives that we're working with, how do we pair that with our small business support? And then the next question is about taking a deeper dive on the 40 mini courses that are available through small business support, understanding what those offerings are. And we have about 6 minutes left. So you do have some time to go into some detail on that. And I'll flip back to the slide while you're talking that really highlights the 5 ways that we really supply technical assistance to small business owners through the learned management system.
Yeah, that sounds great. These are some great questions, and we appreciate them. So let's start with, the question of we've got some things going in our downtown, but how do we support our businesses? So, in a lot of our partnerships, we combine our downtown strategies partnership and our small business support partnership. So know that if you feel like your community needs an action plan. So I'm a former Main Street manager and a former president of an economic development agency. And in my community, there were a lot of initiatives and projects happening, but it stressed me out a little bit sometimes because they weren't always coordinated, right? Arts Council was doing their thing, Chamber was doing their thing, tourism was doing their thing, Main Street was doing their thing. And I really felt like there was a need for everything to be pulled together into one plan. So everybody could still do their own projects, but that we were all working towards kind of a unified vision. So even if you have some really cool things happening in your downtown, if you feel like your community would benefit from a coordinated plan and support implementing that plan, then let's talk about downtown strategies. Of course, we know that a huge part of a really successful downtown is having vibrant businesses. It's not the only way to have a great downtown, but as you can see in this picture, it's real, and this is actually in a client community of ours. It's really nice to have people out eating on the streets, people shopping bags. And so how do we get that? That's through having vibrant businesses. And what we've learned, and I want you guys to think about the businesses in your community. There may be some that you think are rock stars, right? Like, yeah, this coffee shop is awesome. They have great hours, consistent hours. Their Google business profile tells what hours they're open and they live by those. They've got great customer service, a great menu offering, A+. But then you may think, we've got some others that maybe are struggling with adopting new technology. Or maybe you have some folks that are considering opening up a food truck. Maybe they sell at your farmer's market and they want to move into the brick and mortar space, but they're looking for ways to make sure that they set themselves up for success. All of these businesses would be ones that we think could benefit from our small business support program. So a little bit about the training courses that we have. We break down these courses into these 5 learning paths. And so what that means is each of these learning paths have anywhere from 5 to 10 courses that apply to this category. And the course looks different, with every topic, but generally there's a training video that's 5 minutes, 7 minutes, sometimes 2 minutes. Think about TikTok and YouTube. And as a society, we really grasp information in bite-sized formats. So each course has a training video that teaches a certain concept. And then in many of the courses, there's a downloadable resource that will help that business owner put into practice what they learned in the training. So, for example, one of our training courses is about social media content. So we all know how to use Facebook and a lot of folks know how to use Instagram, but how do you really plan out meaningful content that will connect with your audience, with your consumers, and encourage them to spend money? So we have a training on that. And then we have a downloadable social media content calendar that business can download and plug in their own information and really set themselves up for success. So real quick, because I know we may have a few other questions, this is a snapshot of our learning management system. It's really beautiful and it's easy to use. And so you're unlimited number of businesses will be onboarded into the system, and they'll be able to, at a self-paced format, be able to consume this training and download these resources in a way that fits their schedule and fits their needs and interests. Lacey, do we have any other questions, or do you want to?
Those are all the questions, and we're coming right up on the hour. So I'm so glad that you took the deeper dive on the small business support. And thank you to each of you for the commitment you have to your community, improving the community, and really making it a vibrant place to live. And taking the time today to learn more about how you can tap into those ARPA funds. We'd much rather see you invest those rather than give them back to Treasury. And we can help you with that through our downtown revitalization, small business support, or national retail recruitment. Keep us in mind here at Retail Strategies. We are here to help and plug into us as a resource for you. Thank you for your time today. I'm going to hit